Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're looking at a source that fundamentally reframes the adult ADHD experience, and honestly, it's a real game changer. You know how the usual narrative is always about personal failure, like you just need to try harder or you're somehow broken? Well, we can scrap that. Instead, we're exploring a deeply empowering framework called the architect. It beautifully blends neurobiology with inherited family patterns. It's this fascinating lens that gives us a whole new language to finally understand the incredibly fast, intense, and fiery instrument that is the ADHD brain.
All right, let's kick things off with this absolutely incredible metaphor from the text. Just imagine a child who receives the world 3 times as loud. They feel faster, they move faster, they drop out faster, and they fall in love with ideas faster. The source material describes it perfectly. It's a nervous system that literally doesn't have a volume knob, only an amplifier. If you or someone you love has ADHD, I'm betting that chaotic, intense reality probably feels incredibly validating right off the bat, right? So that brings us to part 1, the child with the amplifier, which leads us right into part 2, the double knot.
Now, the text sets up this absolutely fascinating contrast between two huge primal concepts. On one side, we have the mother wound. Now, quick side note, this isn't necessarily about your actual, literal mother. It's about the language of attunement. It's that deep human need to be seen in your pure being, to be co-regulated. When that's missing, the internal belief becomes, I am too much. On the flip side, we have the father hunger. This is the language of direction, structure, and initiation. Think of it as the external scaffolding a child needs to build their life upon. When this is missing, the narrative becomes, I have no direction. We really need to look at how these profound psychological wounds intersect with the unique wiring of an amplified nervous system.
Let's zoom in on that first wound for a second. The source points out that an ADHD child naturally asks for way more attunement than average. I mean, they are intense, feeling, and highly unpredictable. Now picture a mother who's already overtaxed or maybe was never emotionally regulated herself. She simply might not have the reserves. She isn't maliciously withholding love. Her tank is just empty. But the child's brain registers those misconnections. Add in the classic ADHD trait of rejection sensitivity, where every single missed glance feels like a loud, harsh judgment, and the child internalizes this devastating conclusion. I am too much. The wound itself isn't inherently bigger than anyone else's. The amplifier is just turned way, way up. And man, here is where it tangles into what the source calls the double knot. The mother wound is screaming, I am too much, and the brain's rejection sensitivity just reinforces it. Meanwhile, the father hunger is saying, I have no direction. And because the ADHD brain naturally struggles with executive dysfunction, planning, starting tasks, finishing things, that lack of external scaffolding is felt every single day. This just paralyzes a person. They shrink themselves to avoid rejection because they feel like too much, while at the exact same time, they are desperately seeking dopamine as a replacement for that missing direction. Whether that's skydiving, endless doom scrolling, or suddenly buying 14 houseplants at midnight. Dopamine hunger and father hunger become almost indistinguishable. Moving on to part 3, transference, no blame. Now, if you are sitting there starting to feel a bit angry at the parents in this scenario, the source text asks us to hold up and pause. This is absolutely not a story about villains. It's a story about the unspoken, invisible inheritance of biology and trauma. The crucial takeaway here is this: transference, no blame. No one in this story is the perpetrator. Everyone in this story passes on what was passed on to him or her, until someone sees it. Just let that sink in for a second. A mother cannot give the emotional regulation she never received herself. A father cannot point you to true north on a compass he was never handed. They were literally just passing down their own unhealed history. In fact, the text highlights that because ADHD is so highly heritable, there's a massive chance that the mother who couldn't attune or the father who couldn't provide structure was carrying an unregulated ADHD system themselves. But they lived in a time without any of the language or understanding for it. Recognizing this intergenerational transference is just incredibly freeing. It completely evaporates guilt and blame and leaves you with pure, non-judgmental observation. You aren't the victim of a broken chain, you are the breaking point of that chain. Which brings us to part 4, the untangling. So how do we actually break the chain? Well, we have to find a quiet place of pure observation. The text calls this the axis. It's the still point inside you that doesn't have ADHD, doesn't carry the mother wound, and doesn't feel the father hunger. It's simply the observer.
And from this axis, you can finally separate your neurological hardware from your emotional wounds. The division you need to make is so profound. What is brain asks for management. What is wound asks to be seen. The ADHD adult has usually mixed these two up for a lifetime. They've tried to heal their neurology with shame and discipline, which, let's be honest, never works. And they've tried to manage their emotional wounds with planners and productivity apps. But a wound can't read a calendar, right? The brain requires structural architecture without shame. The emotional wound requires validation and light. Therefore, when the system crashes, when that intense overwhelm hits, you stand on your axis and ask yourself this one absolutely vital question. Is this my brain or is this my wound? Does this moment ask for structure or for softness? I'm telling you, asking this question moves you completely out of being trapped inside the pattern and turns you into the observer of the pattern. That shift is everything. Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, the architect of yourself. Okay, here is how we actually start building this practical scaffolding, starting with internalizing the mother function. This is all about self-attunement. Step 1 is recognizing your state without judgment. When you crash, instead of saying, I am too much, you say, my system is full. That little shift is monumental. Step 2 is learning adult co-regulation. Finding safe relationships and practices like breathwork to actually soothe your nervous system. And step 3 is knowing your amplifier. When rejection hurts, you acknowledge it from your axes. Okay, this feels like destruction, but it's just a comment. My amplifier is simply turned on right now. You warmly validate yourself instead of abandoning yourself. Next up, you internalize the father function. This is all about building self-structure, but completely devoid of shame. Step 1 is seeing structure as a foundation, not a punishment. The text uses a brilliant analogy here. External scaffolding for an ADHD brain is exactly like wearing glasses for poor eyesight. It's just a tool, not a character flaw. Step 2 is choosing your direction before dopamine chooses for you. When a shiny new project appears, ask yourself, am I building something here or am I just fleeing? And step 3 is completing the initiation internally. You stop waiting for a mentor or some external authority to finally tap you on the shoulder and say you are enough. You become that voice for yourself. Now, a super quick but totally vital side note for the partners or loved ones standing next to an ADHD adult. The text emphasizes equal dignity here. Remember, you have your own wounds and your own transference. Do not fall into the exhausting trap of trying to become their missing mother or father. That just shrinks both of you. Instead, observe from your own access and look at the whole system together. Two people who can clearly see their own patterns don't have to carry each other's. This whole journey culminates in a really powerful manifesto from the text. It boldly declares, I am not too much, I am a system with an amplifier. I speak no blame, I speak the pattern. What is brain, I manage without shame, like wearing glasses. What is wound, I give light. I do not abandon myself when my system overflows. I no longer chase direction in every glimmer. I am the breaking point of the chain. I am the architect of my own life. And that brings us to just a beautiful realization from the source material. What is seen from the axis can never invisibly control you again. The mother wound and father hunger don't just magically vanish overnight, obviously, but they do fundamentally lose their invisible grip on you. You are no longer a child overwhelmed by an amplifier. You are an empowered adult. You're an architect, finally ready to use your intense, fast, and fiery instrument with newfound agency and purpose. Before we completely wrap up, we do need to cover a quick scientific footnote provided by the source. The research mentioned regarding the heritability of ADHD, rejection sensitivity, and passing down stress is largely associative, meaning it describes group-level connections, not direct individual causes. ADHD is a real neurobiological condition diagnosed by professionals. This framework of the architect is a profound philosophical perspective meant to supplement, but absolutely not replace, professional medical diagnosis and therapy. But looking at it all together, it leaves us with an incredible challenge. Now that you can step back, find your axis, and see your own complex wiring for exactly what it is, what kind of life are you going to build?